What's the weirdest thing a complete stranger has said to you? I'm a server, and as I dropped off the check to one of my tables, I said, "Have a great rest of your day," like I always do. And the guy looked at me dead in the eye and said, "You don't give a crap about me," then left me a 40% tip. Such a weird moment. I work at a restaurant. I brought a guy his coffee, and he said, "Oh, bless you, sir. May your birth control method never fail." Don't worry, sir. My high school health teacher assured me that abstinence has a 100% success rate. When me and my cousin were about 10, we were walking around Walmart. We saw a lady with dreadlocks, and my cousin asked how to get hair like that. She told us that we have to wear a KFC bucket on our heads for 2 months. I was living with 3 roommates, and our toilet needed fixing one day. The landlords came by, and we showed them to the bathroom with the 2 plumbers they had brought. There were at least 6 people in this room, and one of the plumbers looked at only me and started speaking Russian to me. I don't speak Russian. He then says in English, "Oh, you don't speak Russian?" I replied, "No." He gave me a look and then went about his plumbing business. Okay, that was odd. Months later, maybe even a year later or more, I was in a shop at a mall and had been discussing some items with a sales clerk. We'd been talking for some time and she had an accent that sounded Russian. I have an American accent. Toward the end of our conversation, she asks, "Have you ever been to Russia?" I reply, "No." Okay, not weird, as she's from Russia, but then she says, "There's someone in Russia who looks just like you." I'm mildly convinced I'm a sleeper agent or that I have a Russian twin. I did inquire a little further with the clerk, and it did not appear to be a celebrity she was talking about, just a girl in Russia who looked just like me. I may in fact look Russian. I am not aware of any Russian heritage though. I got mugged once in Glasgow as a young teenager. This is how the conversation went. "I'm going to need whatever money you have on you, kid." I got a £20 note, but needed to get the train home. "How much is your ticket?" "About 8 or 9. "Oh, that's alright, I've got change." He took my 20 and gave me the 10 back. Not a bad mugging by any means. At a gas station at 2 a.m., a guy yells, "Hey!" really loud. I think, oh crap, I'm about to get mugged. "Hey!" he shouts again. I look at him, and he continues, "Were you aware that some guitar player died?" "No." He then proceeds to have a wasted conversation about him with me. After what I thought was an amicable conversation, he mugged me. I've posted this before, but a guy came up to me once and asked if I had a light for a smoke. Before I get a chance to respond, he says, "No, wait, you're too fat to smoke," and walked away. 2 guys came up to me while I was gassing up my car and asked, "Hey, do you know what the plastic tip of a shoelace is called?" I did and said, "It's called an aglet." One turns to the other and says, "See, I told you." They went inside. I finished putting gas in my car, and just as I'm about to leave, the guy stops me, gives me a Snickers bar, and leaves. A middle-aged man approached 12-year-old me and a friend, told us, "You're going to be rich one day," and passed us each a coin. My friend got 50 pence. I got 25 Eastern Caribbean dollar cents. I was at college, and this husky guy with an untrimmed neckbeard asked me what time it was. I politely told him what it was, even giving a smile, and he stuck his hand out to me. Confused, I shook his hand, but he seemed confused, almost startled, as he made these weird hand gestures. He whispered, "Oh crap, you don't know the handshake," before leaving with a worried look on his face. Old man, "What do you call that hair color?" Me, "Red, I guess." Old man leaning over, stroking my hair. "I like strawberries. Let's call it strawberry." Ha! When I was a kid, I was walking around and found a pile of broken windshield glass. I don't know if I believed it or not, but I yelled out, "Whoa, I just found diamonds!" And some extremely old man came from a nearby corner and said, "Hand him over." The look on his face when he saw me kneeling over shattered windshield glass was priceless. An older woman walked up calmly and quietly and said, "You remind me of my dead son," which isn't super weird. Grief makes people vulnerable onto themselves. Then, however, she laughed and said, "Oh no, I'm thinking of someone else. What even is your brain right now?" They started stroking my hair, which was super curly, and whispered, "I'd sell my soul for your hair." This was in the grocery store parking lot when I was 10. I was doing my grocery shopping and grabbed some mee goreng noodles off the shelf. A voice piped up behind me, "Don't get those. They're genetically modified. They'll mess up and give you Alzheimer's." Me, "Whoa, what?" Weird stranger, "It's true. My mom had Alzheimer's and I stopped her eating them, and now she doesn't have it anymore." Me, They're just noodles, mate. I'll be okay. Weird stranger. You gotta learn to trust your gut. I'm Russian. I'm psychic, and I'm 50 years old. I know these things. At this point, I looked him straight in the eye and put 2 packs of noodles into my trolley before walking away. I'm not gonna let some frickin' Russian psychic push me around. I was catching the bus home after work late one night. It was about a half-an-hour bus ride, and I had fallen into a deep sleep. I woke up suddenly thinking I had missed my stop when the guy sitting next to me said, "Don't worry, this isn't your stop. You get off at the next one." I'd never seen this guy in my life, and he knew exactly what bus stop I needed to get off at. I was walking my dog and came across a younger guy, maybe 23 or 24, looking at his phone. He was in the middle of the block, and I'd never seen him before. He struck me as odd from a distance because he just looked out of place, like maybe he was lost. Anyway, I get about 5 feet away and he looks up from his phone like I startled him. He stares at me like he thinks he knows me. I stare back. He slowly raises his hand up from his side in a slow arc and points directly at me. His mouth opens. He shouts, I'm gonna slam! I think I said, or at least, what the hell? Then he ran between 2 houses and jumped over a fence. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he was saying. My wife and I, both 24, were waiting for an elevator. The door opens and there was one dude in there, also going down. We smile to acknowledge him and step into the elevator. He immediately steps out right after, he turns around, looks at us and says, I don't deal with kids. And the doors close and we ride down alone. People are weird. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were one of the machines. I was sitting at a bus stop when I heard some murmuring behind me. I thought it was some creepy guy being a creep, so I decided to confront him, asking him to repeat himself. He says much more clearly and looking at me straight in the eyes, I study the ways of life and I'd like to tell you that everything will go well for you. And then he went on his way. I smiled all big, thanked him and told him to have a wonderful day. It was a strange yet pleasant encounter. I drive a Honda Element. Got out of the car to go into the grocery store and a stranger says, guess you're out of your element now. As a child, I was walking through New York with my parents. This complete stranger came up to me and asked which of my parents I preferred. Happened a couple of years ago, at a bar with some friends. This old lady comes up and tells me, you look like the kind of guy that would have babies with my granddaughter. Don't know if that's an insult or a compliment. My sister is 10 years younger than me, and I get regularly told that my daughter looks just like me. Half the time, my mom is actually with us when people tell me this. Buying cat food at PetSmart. Cashier hands me the receipt and says, enjoy your meal. Someone yelled, sausage supper, at me as they drove past. This was maybe 20 years ago, and I still think about it maybe once every 6 months. It still baffles me. There was an off-kilter man around the leisure center near me when I was in my low teens. He got booted for trying to wrestle my popcorn away from me. As they were escorting him out, he said, he's too young. You gotta be 300 before you're allowed to eat popcorn. I hope his loved ones helped him. My aunt worked in a blood bank at the front desk. One day, an older gentleman walked in, stared at her for a second, pulled out a book about the care and feeding of parakeets and just said, parakeets, in a sing-songy voice, and turned and walked back out again. My little brother and I were walking through the suburb to get to the post office and collect a package. When we were almost all the way there, a tall bearded man with wild hair and a dirty pink onesie put himself between the post office and us. He was maybe 50 and looked like a typical, I've been an alcoholic my whole life kind of person. In his arms, he held a wild hare that he somehow had caught. He said to us, do you see this bunny? Yeah? And with the most sad voice I have ever heard, he said, isn't life just completely worth it? And then he walked on. I've had weird things before, but this one is one of the top 3 ones for sure. Boarded a bus a few years ago wearing an Iron Maiden shirt. I think it had a few burning skulls and a scarecrow with a scythe. And a man with a thick Nigerian accent cried, witchcraft, witchcraft, with what seemed to be genuine terror before disembarking. Not to me, but to my sister. She has some kind of weirdo magnet because random people always say crazy stuff to her. Anyway, she was walking on the street going to work and a dude approaches her and says, hey lady, could I have some of your blood, please? In the most natural way. Oh god, it reminds me of what I said to someone. I once was in the local corner shop with a few friends when I saw someone dressed exactly the same as one of my friends buying a sandwich. As he walks to the door, I'm like, what sandwich you got there, mate? He looks at me and I'm like, Ah, crap, that's not my friend. I was walking in a corridor at Walmart, and a can fell out of a pile I was passing by without breaking stride or looking. I caught the can midair and put it back. A dude behind me saw it and told me, "You have a strong soul." Still not sure what that means. One time, I was informed by a stranger that I had a lovely purple aura. I've had several people do that to me. The weirdest part is it's always a green aura and a gold aura around my feet, or gold aura and green around my feet. I don't believe in any of that stuff, but oddly about 5 to 6 people have all told me nearly the same thing. One of the weirdest yet most interesting moments we had with a stranger was this time a friend of mine, Mike, and I were standing outside of a liquor store. Both of us were 20 years old at the time, so we were unable to buy alcohol but could freely smoke cigarettes. Our other friend, Zach, who was 21 and met Mike his first year at college, was in the store buying us whiskey for the night because he was such a nice guy. Zach doesn't really drink, so he was just doing us a favor. It was cold, typical Chicago winter, but that night actually wasn't that bad. Mike and I had gone in before Zach so I could get a pack of cigarettes, and Mike got a $2 scratch lottery ticket. We waited patiently outside, each indulging a vice. Then I noticed someone approaching us. I have lived in Chicago long enough to recognize a homeless person, and I've heard pretty much all the stories. I was instantly cynical, but I had never been more wrong in my life. I at least expected him to ask me for a cigarette, but the first words out of his mouth were, "Hey gentlemen, how are you doing?" I was honestly taken aback, but we both said almost in unison, "Good," and commented about how nice it was that night. With a laugh and a friendly smile, he said, "Yeah, me too. Y'all got any plans?" We told him we were going to meet up with some friends after our buddy came out of the store. He smiled again and said, "Well, y'all be safe now. I got a joint from the Mexicans at the car shop. I'm gonna go to my spot in the alley, smoke, and put out a sign. The one when I don't want anybody around. Do not disturb the rat in the hole. They know this is the condominium, and leave me alone." Mike and I both looked at each other right after he said that. We both love writing and instantly recognized the beauty of what he had just said. To this day, I have yet to hear a more sincere poetic phrase, and it stuck with me. Do not disturb the rat in the hole. I offered him a cigarette, but he declined. All he seemed to want was a conversation, a simple exchange of words. At the time, I was jealous of his indifference to a very, very beautiful phrase he coined. Do not disturb the rat in the hole. Zach came out from the store shortly after, and we told him we had to go. We shook hands with the man, and as we were walking away, we heard him shout to us, "Happy New Year!" I can never forget that guy, and do not disturb the rat in the hole. It was New Year's Day in the new millennium. I was 9 and my parents took me to Spain for the new year. On New Year's Day, I noticed in a car park a moped with an old-fashioned horn, like a clown horn that you squeeze, and for some reason was fascinated by it. A guy comes out of the payment office, notices me looking at his bike, unscrews the horn and gives it to me, says Happy New Year and wanders off. It probably wasn't his bike. Don't be scared, said to me by my new across-the-street neighbor. I was working in my garage installing a whole house water filter when he decided now would be a good time to introduce himself. As he was walking up, it dawned on me that he's actually sneaking up behind me, so he starts to think of the best way to get my attention while trying not to cause me to freak out. He concludes that don't be scared was the best option. You have beautiful eyes, which in itself isn't that weird, but quite a nice compliment, to which I awkwardly replied, "Thank you?" It was their response to this that was weird. What? Aren't you going to compliment mine? Awkward. I took a photo of a Chinese family in London. They asked me, and the father told me, "You'll be a good father." Once I returned the cell phone, my fiancé couldn't stop laughing. Also, once, a hobo stopped me in the street and asked me, "Do you like Bob Dylan?" and then started singing something while walking away. I was in the supermarket. An older woman stood in front of the milk section, exactly where I wanted to go, and took her time looking at the milk and yogurt, etc. I waited patiently for her to clear the way to my favorite product. After a while, she turns around, looks at me, and says, "I hate milk. Can you imagine it comes from cows?" and walks away. Checking into a hotel with my wife on our honeymoon, we had this exchange with the front desk. Him, "Good morning, welcome to Sandals." Me, "Good morning, thanks, we're pretty excited to be here." Him, "How was the trip from Canada?" Me, "Pardon?" Him, "How was the trip from Canada?" Me, ... Him, "You are from Canada, right?" Me, "No, we are from the States." Him, "I just assumed that you were Canadian because of the hair." Me, "I'm sorry, what?" Him. My apologies. I saw your hair and just assumed you were from Canada. Can I please have an ID and credit card for any incidentals? Me. To my wife out of the corner of my mouth. What the hell just happened? Who are you and what are you doing in my bed? Outside a Subway, a homeless guy walks up. Guy. What's going on? Me. Just waiting for my friends to get a sub. Guy. What's really going on? Me. Seriously, just waiting for subs. Guy. What's really going on? What's really going on though? There are 1,000 eyes watching us right now. If you had been born earlier, then you could have been a Polish general. It was a while ago, so I might be remembering the Polish part wrong, which would make sense since I'm not Polish and we were not in Poland. I was waiting at the train station and there was already a train there, but it wasn't mine. A woman arrived and stopped a few meters away from me. She started searching for something in her bag, and as she did this, she dropped a paper that she was holding, like a brown paper bag. As the paper drops on the floor, she looks at it and then looks at me and yells, "It's your fault! It's all your fault!" and runs to the train. I was on a train as a teenager with a friend of mine, and this little old lady came up to us and said, "Don't worry, you two have beautiful souls." Then she got off the train. We sat there for a few minutes just wondering, did that old lady just call us ugly? I was walking around the city with my girlfriend at the time when a random, presumably homeless man yelled out, "Hey young man! Hey young man, young man! If you wrote a book, I would buy it. Thanks, I think." A person said, "You have a pretty mouth." Yes, I know that's a line from Deliverance. I have been asked twice by people I've never met if they could pet my legs. I have very hairy legs. I said yes both times. In a shoe store in a town where I knew no one, this woman walked up to me and said, "I just want to tell you he's really sorry for what he's done. He wants you to know how much he regrets how he's hurt you." I just looked at her, feeling very confused. She said she had to give me that message, and then turned around and walked away. A man stopped me in the street and said, "I was a pirate yesterday," and walked off. He looked lost, so I thought he was going to ask for directions, but he just came out with that, and off he went. I was pruning a tree in my front yard and couldn't reach one of the higher branches, so I jumped and grabbed the branch to pull it down. As I'm pulling the branch down to cut it, a car slows down and the driver yells out his window, "Leave the tree alone!" I'm still not sure what that was about. I was around 13 or 14 and an old man came up to my friends and me and shouted, "It is all history, this, but it is happening now." He is right, I guess, but it was very odd. I was at an ice rink and a homeless man was short a dime, so I covered him and he said, "Thanks, squirrel," to me. I still think about that almost 10 years later. While going home with friends after a party, about 2 or 3 a.m., a strange toothless guy told us that we were reincarnations of still living famous people. A weird old dude comes up to me in the grocery store and proceeds to tell me, "Never shave your mustache, only tweeze it." That is weird enough, but it gets weirder. I tell my friends this story about 2 weeks later, and he tells me about how the same dude had said that to him 2 months earlier in a whole different part of town. Haven't seen the dude since, and I still wonder why he is so set on getting people to tweeze their mustaches. Hey, that bus over there says you look like Neville from Harry Potter. I don't know what that means, but they wanted me to tell you. There's a bank on the bottom floor of the building I work in. There's one woman who is always there waiting for it to open. I'd say 3 to 4 days a week. Every time I walk past her, which is usually 3 mornings every week, she shouts, "Hi, nephew!" Then she explains to anyone nearby that I look just like her nephew. Sometimes I take the service elevator just to avoid her. I'm in a wheelchair, and once while I was sitting waiting for a friend to use a service station bathroom, a random woman walked right up to me and stood and simply asked, "Oh my God, what happened?" I was speechless for a good 10 seconds and then simply said, "I don't know you." Oh man, I've been waiting for this one. My girlfriend and I had just moved to a new neighborhood and decided to grab a bite of sushi. When the waitress brought out our order, she, clearly not speaking much English, extended her palm toward the purple chic lamp hanging from the ceiling and said, "The light shines upon the table," set the tray down and walked away. 4 years later, we still wonder WTF she meant by that. Some guy in a Walmart looked at me dead in the eye and said, "You are the bringer of darkness." Well, hell man, I wish I was, but here I am working in retail. The darkness brings itself to me. My friend and I were standing on a bridge around midnight, looking at the ducks below. An Asian guy came whizzing by on a bike and yelled, "Don't you jump in! I come after you!" When I was a barista in a small coffee shop, one day an old man in his late 70s came to the counter and said to me, "You'd only be a homewrecker for about a year. Then you'd be a rich widow." I asked some guy for directions, and he was going to the same way, so he walked with me for a couple of minutes before the road splits off. He began telling me about the antisocial behavior of kids in his area, and how they had the right idea just with the wrong people. What the hell? In a Pizza Hut with my 2 toddler-age kids and 2 adult friends, a guy asked me how I would like it if he took a shotgun to my legs. He heard us talking about Star Fox and how the characters had metal legs because they volunteered for amputation to be able to resist higher Gs. I laughed because it seemed like a very specific detail of world building for a game very light in the story. He thought I was laughing at amputees. Had a brother who lost both legs in Vietnam and proceeded to threaten to shoot my legs off. I was walking through Target and I see a kid about 10 heelying around. He comes up and passes us, exclaiming, "Why walk when you can roll?" This was like a month ago. Last year, I was out celebrating my birthday with 2 of my brothers, who were both on leave, S, who was a Marine, and R, who was a sergeant in the Air Force. We decided to walk to another bar since it was pretty early still. We were on the 2nd floor of this weird outdoor patio-type joint, and they were walking ahead of me towards the stairs. I had my purse in one hand and a drink I was trying to finish in the other. Some random wasted guy came up behind me and literally threw his left arm around my shoulders while screaming, "I'm not going to hurt you," at the top of his lungs. Both of my brothers turned around and I could legit see the goddamn-it look in my youngest brother's eyes right before the creepy guy went sailing across the dance floor. Let us say Creeper was extremely lucky only 2 of my brothers were home for my birthday. The oldest brother, Jay, was deployed, Army, and the other one, Kay, was in rehab. I was walking down to Walmart when a dude just randomly came up to me and asked if I knew anyone who sold weed. A lot of people smoke weed where I'm at, but it just seemed odd to me, especially since we were near a Walmart of all places, and I really don't look like someone who would smoke weed. Once a guy on a bike kept circling around the park benches we were sitting on and finally asked us if we would sell him weed. He was for sure 100% safe as a cop. We had heard stories about them lurking around casually talking about weed. We told him no and he left. Luckily, we had finished right before he arrived and just kept our cool. I like to vomit up a little. What? You know, in the microwave? They probably said warm it instead of vomit, and you misheard them. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have an example you'd like to give, please do so in the comments below. Then be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when our next video is available. For more videos just like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.